5:47 a.m. The roar of a diesel engine rips me out of bed. I bolt outside in nothing but boxers, barefoot on cold gravel, and see my 28-foot Grady White, my entire life savings, already hooked to a tow truck, rolling down the street like it's trash. 3 years of double shifts, every overtime check, every skipped vacation, gone in 60 seconds. And there she is, Delilah Westbrook, HOA president, arms crossed in her $300 Lululemon set, smirking like she just won the lottery. "Your boat's too big for our neighborhood, Marcus." I'm shaking with rage, ready to lose everything in that moment, when I remember one tiny detail I never told a soul. Turns out that little lake everyone uses, the one their precious boating club treats like a playground, I own it, every single inch. And soon enough, Delilah's about to discover what happens when you try to steal from the man who can ban your entire club from the water forever. What would you have done in my place? Drop your state below, because what happened next made her wish she'd never touched my boat. Let me back up and tell you how a boat mechanic like me ended up in a war with the neighborhood queen. I'm Marcus Kellerman, 52, spent my life elbow deep in boat engines. 20 years in a cramped apartment above my shop, hands permanently stained with motor oil, living paycheck to paycheck. The smell of diesel fuel and WD-40 was my daily cologne. Then Uncle Ezra changed everything. Ezra was the family legend, lived alone on this incredible lakefront property in Willowbrook Estates, refused to sell even when developers waved million-dollar checks. Neighbors called him eccentric. I called him free. When his lawyer called saying he'd left me everything, I thought someone was pranking me. Sarah and I drove out there on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The moment we stepped out of my beat-up pickup, everything changed. 3 acres on Clearwater Lake, private docks stretching into crystal clear water, and a house that felt like someone else's dream. That first morning as the new owner, the smell of clean lake water mixed with honeysuckle nearly knocked me over. I'd never breathed air that pure. The crunch of premium gravel under my work boots felt foreign, like walking on someone else's property, even though the deed had my name on it. Willowbrook Estates wasn't built for guys like me. 15 mansions ranging from $800,000 to $2 million. The kind of place where everyone drives luxury cars with dealer plates still attached and discusses quarterly earnings over morning coffee. Perfectly manicured lawns, underground sprinkler systems, the works. I felt like a grease monkey who'd accidentally wandered into a country club. The community itself was gorgeous, don't get me wrong. Clearwater Lake stretched 47 acres of pristine water, surrounded by homes that belonged in architectural magazines. Most residents were either retired executives or successful professionals, doctors, lawyers, tech entrepreneurs. Then there's me with my Marine Corps tattoo and permanent grease stains. Then I met Delilah Westbrook, and paradise became hell. Picture your worst nightmare, HOA president. 58, real estate agent who knows exactly what everyone paid for their house and loves dropping those numbers in conversation. Blonde hair that costs more than my monthly grocery budget, always dressed like she's heading to a country club lunch. Married to Richard Westbrook, who owns the biggest marine dealership in 3 counties. Conflict of interest, anyone? They live in the crown jewel of Willowbrook, a massive lakefront mansion with professional landscaping, a 3-car garage, and a 35-foot sea ray anchored at the community dock like it owns the place. For 3 years, Delilah had been running this community like her personal kingdom, interpreting every rule to benefit her inner circle. The war started my second week. I'm backing my pride and joy, a 28-foot Grady White I'd saved 3 years to buy, into my driveway when I hear those designer heels clicking across my porch like a death march. The sound still gives me chills. "Welcome to Willowbrook," Delilah says, but her eyes are dissecting my boat like a medical examiner. That's quite an imposing vessel. The way she said imposing made my skin crawl. Thanks, she's everything to me. I'm sure you'll want to review our aesthetic guidelines immediately. Section 7.3 specifically addresses oversized recreational equipment disrupting neighborhood harmony. Standing there on my own gravel driveway, I felt like a kid being scolded by the principal for something I didn't even know was wrong. Here's the dirty secret I discovered later. Clause 7. 3 originally banned RVs and trailers. Makes perfect sense. Nobody wants a beat-up camper blocking million-dollar lake views. But in December 2022, while half the community was in Florida avoiding winter, Delilah pushed through an amendment adding recreational vessels to the restriction. The vote? 4-3. Only 7 homeowners even knew about the meeting. 25 feet maximum for boats. Mine measured 28 feet. Her yacht sitting pretty at the community dock? 35 feet of floating hypocrisy. When I brought up Delilah's yacht hypocrisy at my first HOA meeting, she deployed that weapon-grade realtor smile and a response that still makes me laugh. The community dock operates under different maritime regulations, Marcus. My vessel provides essential security services for our lake. Security services for a gated community in suburban America. Right, because lake pirates are such a threat in suburbia. The taste of stale coffee turned bitter in my mouth as I realized I was dealing with someone who could twist physics if it served her purposes. But I had no idea how twisted things were about to get. 3 days later, I wake up to find a manila envelope taped to my front door like some kind of legal death warrant. Inside, a bill for $1,050, boat retrieval fee plus daily storage at, surprise, surprise, Westbrook Marine, Delilah's husband's lot. The paperwork demanded proof of compliance modifications before release. What modifications? Sawing 3 feet off my boat? Installing a shrinking ray? This is literally extortion, I told Sarah over breakfast, my hands shaking as I read the fine print. They're forcing me to pay her family to get my own property back. But Delilah was just warming up her legal artillery. 2 days later, certified mail arrived from Hoffman & Associates, the HOA's attack dogs. Thick cream paper, embossed letterhead, the kind of stationery designed to make working folks feel like ants. The message landed like a punch to the gut. Continued violations subject to escalating fines and potential property liens. Property liens. Over 3 feet of boat length. They wanted to take my house. That lunch break, I hit the county courthouse like a man possessed. My Uncle Eddie used to say, "When someone's trying to screw you, the devil's always in the details." Smart man, Uncle Eddie. I started digging through public records, and the smell of old paper and bureaucracy filled my nostrils as I uncovered Delilah's dirty little secret. The original 1987 HOA covenants, clean as a whistle. No boat restrictions whatsoever. Recreational vehicles clearly meant RVs and trailers, period. But there it was, buried in a December 2022 amendment. Recreational vessels exceeding community aesthetic standards. Slipped through when half the community was in Florida avoiding winter. I remembered something from my divorce lawyer days. Yeah, Sarah and I had a rough patch once about HOA rules requiring proper notice and quorum. Most states mandate 30-day advance notice to all homeowners plus minimum attendance for valid votes. Delilah's little coup? 7 people out of 15 households. Legally sketchy at best. Armed with this ammunition, I launched my counterattack. That weekend, I became the neighborhood's most dedicated boat measurer. Camera in hand, tape measure ready, I documented every vessel in Willowbrook like I was conducting a marine census. My neighbors probably thought I'd snapped, but I was building a lawsuit. 6 boats over 25 feet. 6. Including Dr. Patel's 27-footer and Jim Morrison's 30-foot cabin cruiser. All stored on private property, all owned by people who had no clue they were suddenly criminals in Delilah's kingdom. The spreadsheet I created was a thing of beauty. Boat names, exact measurements, storage locations, photographic evidence. Perfect documentation of selective enforcement that would make any civil rights lawyer drool. But Delilah had more tricks up her designer sleeves. Monday morning brought another envelope, thicker this time, an amended violation notice that read like a comedy sketch written by a control freak. Boat trailer color violation, white instead of community-approved charcoal gray. Boat name visibility violation. My Sarah's Dream lettering was excessively prominent for residential viewing areas. Improper covering violation. Blue tarps were aesthetically incompatible with neighborhood standards. Total fines, $2,100. For a boat, legally parked, on property I owned. The audacity was breathtaking. I fired back immediately, submitting a formal complaint about Delilah's 35-foot yacht violation. If 25 feet was the limit, her floating palace needed to go, regardless of her imaginary security patrol duties. Her response arrived faster than pizza delivery. Another violation notice, this one citing retaliatory behavior and harassment of board members. Apparently requesting equal treatment under the law qualified as harassment in Queen Delilah's court. That's when I realized something chilling. This woman wasn't just power-hungry. She was creating a reign of terror. My neighbor Beatrice confirmed it that evening, appearing at my door after dark like a refugee seeking asylum. The smell of her nervous lavender perfume mixed with genuine fear. "She got me too," Beatrice whispered, eyes darting around. 15 years, same pool deck, suddenly it's non-conforming gray. Jim's work truck, 20 years in his own driveway, suddenly commercial vehicle violation. Standing there in my doorway watching a 70-year-old schoolteacher scurry home in fear, I understood the true scope of Delilah's tyranny. This wasn't about rules or property values. This was about control. Total, absolute control. What Delilah didn't know was that Uncle Ezra had left me the ultimate trump card. But first, she was about to show me just how ruthless a cornered HOA dictator could become. Delilah's next move hit me like a freight train loaded with legal documents. Thursday morning, I'm sipping coffee and checking mail when I find a notice that makes the mug slip from my hands, ceramic exploding across the driveway like my hopes for a peaceful life. Property lien, filed against my house for accumulating HOA violations and unpaid fines, $4,000, growing by $150 daily like some financial cancer. But that wasn't even the knockout punch. Delilah had convinced the board to revoke my guest parking privileges, which meant my marine repair customers, guys who'd been coming to me for years, couldn't park in the community anymore. My side business, the income that helped pay the mortgage on this dream house, was being systematically strangled. "She's trying to bankrupt us," I told Sarah that evening, legal papers scattered across our kitchen table like evidence of a crime. The smell of reheated lasagna couldn't mask the bitter taste of financial warfare in the air. Meanwhile, Delilah was poisoning the community well against me. Conversations died when I walked past the mailboxes. The UPS guy mentioned hearing rumors about my unlicensed commercial operations. Even sweet Mrs. Naomi started crossing the street to avoid me like I had some contagious disease called property value destruction. That weekend, I made the best $500 investment of my life, a consultation with attorney Janelle Rodriguez. Sharp as a scalpel, late 30s, the kind of lawyer who'd made a career out of slaying neighborhood dragons. "Your HOA is playing fast and loose with state regulations," she said after reviewing my documentation. "These amendments were rammed through during holiday season without proper homeowner notification." She explained something that gave me my first real hope in weeks. My old divorce attorney had mentioned this years ago. HOA covenant changes require specific procedures. 30-day advance notice, certified mail to all residents, proper quorum for voting. Delilah's boat restrictions, pushed through with 7 people present out of 15 households, minimal notice, during Christmas week when half the community was traveling. The entire amendment could be legally void, Rodriguez said, and for the first time in weeks I felt like I could breathe. But while Rodriguez prepared our legal counterattack, Delilah was escalating to psychological warfare. My boat trailer tires were slashed Tuesday night. 4 brand-new Michelin tires reduced to rubber confetti in my own driveway. The security cameras that had worked perfectly for months mysteriously malfunctioned, according to the management company. Repair estimate, $300 I didn't have. Then came the emergency assessment notice, $3,200 per household for enhanced security measures following recent vandalism incidents. The timing was so obviously targeted, it made my teeth ache. But Delilah's true masterpiece was the complaint blitzkrieg. Anonymous reports flooded county offices faster than a burst dam. Environmental services showed up investigating illegal runoff from commercial activities. The fire department responded to tips about improperly stored hazardous materials. Code enforcement arrived checking for unpermitted structural modifications I'd never made. Every inspection came up clean, but that wasn't the point. The message was crystal clear. Challenge Queen Delilah, and your life becomes a bureaucratic horror show. The community was cracking apart like a sidewalk in an earthquake. Dr. Patel whispered about getting violation notices for his garden gnomes. Apparently they violated cultural aesthetic standards. Jim Morrison's routine deck repair permit was suddenly rejected after 20 years of automatic approvals. Beatrice's teenage grandson got banned from the community dock for loitering and disruptive behavior. Kid was just feeding the ducks. Anyone who'd shown me basic human decency was getting the full Delilah treatment. But something beautiful started happening. Beatrice, Dr. Patel, and Jim began fighting back. Secret meetings in my workshop, sharing violation photos, documenting harassment patterns like we were building a war crimes tribunal, which honestly we kind of were. The smell of sawdust and motor oil in my workshop became the scent of resistance. These weren't just neighbors anymore. They were allies in a battle for basic fairness. That's when Rodriguez called with news that made my pulse quicken. "Marcus, I've been diving deeper into your property history. Your Uncle Ezra's deed contains some interesting provisions I want to research further. Water rights, easement clauses, some technical language about lake access that predates the HOA formation." She couldn't give details yet, needed to verify records at the county assessor's office, but her tone carried the excitement of a prospector who'd found gold glinting in the pan. "Next week, we meet at the courthouse," she said. "I have a feeling your uncle left you more than just a pretty house." Delilah thought she was crushing a troublesome blue-collar neighbor who didn't belong in her pristine kingdom. What she didn't realize was that she was about to discover who actually held the power in this community. And the irony was going to be absolutely delicious. Delilah's nuclear option arrived on a Tuesday that started normal and ended with me questioning everything I thought I knew about justice in America. The doorbell rang at 7 a.m. sharp. 2 county code enforcement officers, clipboards ready, official badges gleaming in the morning sun. Behind them stood Delilah in her signature power suit, arms crossed, wearing the smile of someone who'd just called in an airstrike on an anthill. "Mr. Kellerman, we're here regarding complaints about commercial activities violating residential zoning restrictions." Commercial activities. Because apparently fixing a neighbor's boat engine in my own garage now qualified as running General Motors from my driveway. But that was just the opening act of Delilah's symphony of harassment. The HOA emergency meeting that evening was a kangaroo court disguised as democracy. 5 board members, all Delilah loyalists, voted to ban all watercraft maintenance activities on residential properties. And the vote was 5-4, with Dr. Patel, Beatrice, Jim, and surprisingly, Mrs. Naomi standing with me. "Community safety requires professional oversight of mechanical activities," Delilah announced, reading from prepared remarks like she was delivering a State of the Union address. "Residential areas aren't appropriate for commercial marine services." The irony burned like acid reflux. Her husband ran a marine business, but somehow my occasionally helping neighbors was a threat to civilization. 2 days later, the harassment went criminal. I'm walking to my mailbox when Officer Bradley from County Sheriff's Department pulls up, the crunch of gravel under his patrol car tires sounding ominous in the morning quiet. My heart rate spiked. Nothing good ever starts with a police visit at breakfast time. "Mr. Kellerman, I need to ask you about some threats allegedly made against Mrs. Delilah Westbrook." Threats. Apparently my heated comment at the HOA meeting, "This harassment needs to stop before someone gets hurt," had been transformed into a terroristic threat worthy of police investigation. Officer Bradley was professional but thorough, took statements, reviewed security footage, asked neighbors about my behavior. Thank God for character witnesses. Dr. Patel's testimonial about my consistently calm and professional demeanor probably saved me from arrest. But here's where things got interesting. While Officer Bradley was interviewing neighbors, he discovered something that made Delilah's face go white as fresh paint. Jim Morrison mentioned the slashed tires. Mrs. Naomi brought up the mysterious security camera malfunctions. Dr. Patel shared photos of his own property vandalism. Suddenly, Officer Bradley wasn't just investigating alleged threats from me. He was documenting a pattern of harassment against me. "Ma'am," he told Delilah, "I'm seeing evidence of ongoing property crimes here. Have you filed reports about any of these incidents?" Delilah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She'd been so focused on destroying me that she'd forgotten her harassment campaign was also illegal. These are separate matters, officer. My complaint is about verbal threats." "Understood, but I'm required to investigate all criminal activity I encounter. Mr. Kellerman, have you filed reports about the tire slashing and property damage?" The tables were turning right there in my driveway, and Delilah knew it. While I was dealing with potential criminal charges that were looking shakier by the minute, Delilah launched her most desperate move yet, foreclosure proceedings. The notice arrived via process server, a thin, nervous man who looked apologetic about delivering documents that could cost me my home. Unpaid fines totaling $6,800, plus legal fees, plus interest. The HOA was demanding immediate payment or forced sale of my property. That night, Sarah found me in the workshop, surrounded by legal papers and empty beer bottles, the smell of sawdust mixing with the bitter taste of injustice. "Maybe we should just sell," she said quietly. "Find somewhere else to start over." For exactly 30 seconds, I considered surrender. Pack up, take whatever equity remained after legal fees, find some apartment where HOAs didn't exist, and neighbors minded their own business. Then I thought about Uncle Ezra. 40 years on this property, refusing million-dollar developer offers to preserve something beautiful for family. He'd trusted me with his legacy, and I was letting some power-hungry real estate agent destroy it with paperwork and petty tyranny. "No," I told Sarah, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "We're not running." That's when Rodriguez called with news that made my pulse quicken. "Marcus, you need to get down to the courthouse tomorrow morning. I've found something in your uncle's property records that's going to change this entire game." Her voice carried the excitement of a prosecutor who just found the smoking gun. "Your uncle didn't just own waterfront property. He owned rights that predate this entire community development, rights that could give you nuclear-level leverage." The smell of possibility mixed with motor oil in my workshop. After weeks of playing defense, I was about to discover weapons I didn't know existed. Delilah had pushed me to the edge of losing everything. She thought she was crushing a troublesome neighbor who didn't know his place. What she was actually doing was about to backfire in ways that would make her deepest nightmares seem pleasant. The county assessor's office smelled like old paper and broken dreams, but what Rodriguez and I discovered there that Wednesday morning changed everything. "Marcus, sit down," Rodriguez said, her voice carrying the gravity of someone about to deliver life-altering news. She spread documents across the research table like she was revealing buried treasure. "Your Uncle Ezra wasn't just a lakefront property owner, he was the lake owner." My coffee cup went cold in my hands as I stared at the original 1956 land grant. The faded ink and official seals looked ancient, but the meaning was crystal clear. Ezra's family hadn't just bought waterfront property, they'd purchased mineral rights, water rights, and exclusive control over all 47 acres of Clearwater Lake. "This can't be real," I whispered, my voice cracking like I was 13 again. "It gets better," Rodriguez said, pulling out another document that made the room spin. "When the subdivision developed in the 80s, your uncle retained lake ownership through the Clearwater Lake Conservation Trust." The word trust hit me like a physical blow. Uncle Ezra, quiet, eccentric Uncle Ezra, who everyone thought was just a hermit with too much land, had been playing chess while everyone else played checkers. He'd established a conservation trust in 1987, maintaining complete control over the lake bed, water rights, and a 50-foot buffer zone around the entire shoreline. Every dock, every boat slip, every inch of waterfront that Delilah's community enjoyed, it all existed on my uncle's terms. "The community only has a recreational use license," Rodriguez explained, her finger tracing legal language that was about to detonate Delilah's world. "A license that can be revoked for violations." I was scanning the trust documents when one clause jumped out like lightning. "Licensed use contingent upon maintaining harmonious community relationships and prohibiting discriminatory or harassing behavior toward residents." My hands started shaking. Delilah's entire harassment campaign, every violation notice, every threat, every attempt to destroy my life, violated the trust's foundational principles. But Rodriguez wasn't finished destroying my conception of reality. "The trust receives $15,000 annually in license fees from the community," she said, showing me bank statements that made my head swim. "Money accumulating in an account for 36 years. Money that's legally yours as trustee." The math made me dizzy. Over $500,000 just sitting there. And Marcus? Westbrook Marine has been using trust property for commercial boat storage without authorization. They owe $18,000 in unpaid fees. The irony was so perfect it physically hurt. Delilah's husband had been running illegal commercial operations on my property while she was destroying me for fixing neighbors' boats in my garage. The smell of victory mixed with old paper and disbelief. "What does this mean?" I asked, though my racing heart already knew. Rodriguez's smile could have lit up the courthouse. "It means you're not fighting HOA violations anymore. You're a trustee with authority over the entire lake. You can terminate water access. You can ban individuals for trust violations. You can shut down unauthorized commercial activities." I thought about every humiliation, the towed boat, the violation notices, the threats, the sleepless nights worrying about losing my home. Delilah had spent months trying to control my access to 3 feet of boat length. She'd been terrorizing the person who owned the entire lake. "There's one more thing," Rodriguez said, unfolding a property map. "This 50-foot buffer zone, half the community docks are built on trust land without authorization, including Delilah's dock, her husband's storage area. The yacht club slips where her friends parked their floating symbols of superiority. All of it sat on property I controlled. So while she was trying to take away my boat privileges, you could take away everyone's lake privileges, including hers. Uncle Ezra, you beautiful, brilliant man, you'd given me the ultimate trump card. Now I just had to decide how to play it. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt like I'd just discovered I was secretly Superman. But Rodriguez yanked me back to reality fast. "Marcus, having nuclear weapons doesn't mean you should use them," she said, legal documents scattered across her car dashboard like battle plans. "We need surgical precision, not scorched earth." She was absolutely right. I could obliterate Delilah's world tomorrow, revoke every permit, shut down the yacht club, ban her husband's business permanently. But that would hurt innocent people like Beatrice and Dr. Patel, who'd risked everything to support me. "Smart revenge is better than satisfying revenge," Rodriguez said, and I knew Uncle Ezra would have loved that philosophy. That evening, I called an emergency war council in my workshop. The familiar smell of sawdust and motor oil felt like sanctuary as my allies gathered around the workbench. Beatrice, Dr. Patel, Jim, and Sarah, my unlikely band of suburban rebels. "I need to tell you something that's going to sound insane," I began. "I own the lake." The silence stretched so long I could hear Mrs. Naomi's wind chimes tinkling next door. "Excuse me," Jim said, nearly dropping his coffee. When I finished explaining the trust discovery, Dr. Patel, 30 years in federal research, grasped the implications first. "You're telling me Delilah has been terrorizing the legal owner of the property she depends on for access?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Beatrice started that laugh that comes when karma gets so perfect it hurts. "She spent months making you feel unwelcome in your own community. Turns out she's the trespasser. But I wasn't planning simple revenge. Uncle Ezra had created something bigger, a vision of conservation and community that I was honor-bound to protect. The next week became a masterclass in legal warfare preparation. Rodriguez and I built our case like architects designing a cathedral. Every detail perfect, every angle covered. Trust law, I learned from my old construction days working historic preservation, gives trustees massive power but clear responsibilities. I could terminate violations, but everything had to serve the trust's conservation and community goals. Our investigation revealed Delilah's full criminal enterprise. Westbrook Marine wasn't just storing boats illegally. They'd been charging premium rates for exclusive lakefront access they had no rights to provide. The scam was brilliant. Create HOA restrictions, forcing residents to use specific services, then profit from that captive market. "It's extortion with paperwork," Rodriguez said, her voice carrying the excitement of a prosecutor who'd found the perfect case. Meanwhile, Dr. Patel was conducting covert intelligence operations that would have made the CIA proud. His anonymous community survey revealed explosive results. 11 households hated Delilah's leadership, 8 didn't know about her husband's conflicts of interest, 6 had received retaliatory violations since my boat war began. The community was a powder keg waiting for someone to light the fuse. That's when I remembered Sergeant Morrison's advice from my Marine Corps days: win the war before firing the first shot. Instead of attacking immediately, I'd let Delilah's desperation create more violations while building an overwhelming case. The strategy was beautifully simple. Give her enough rope to hang herself while documenting every illegal action for maximum legal devastation. Rodriguez was preparing a multi-pronged assault that would have impressed Napoleon. Civil rights violations for discriminatory enforcement, trust violations for unauthorized commercial exploitation, contract fraud for illegal fee structures, financial crimes for the captive market scheme. "We're not just stopping a neighborhood bully," she explained, her eyes gleaming with legal bloodlust. "We're dismantling organized community fraud." But the genius move was the environmental angle. Conservation trusts qualify for federal matching grants. I could use accumulated trust funds to leverage serious money for habitat restoration, water quality improvements, and community facility upgrades. Instead of just destroying Delilah, I could transform Willowbrook into everything it pretended to be. The timeline was perfect. Next HOA meeting in 2 weeks, enough time for Delilah's paranoia to create more violations, but not enough for her to escape the trap she'd built around herself. That Saturday, while researching grant opportunities, I found Uncle Ezra's private journals hidden in his old desk. The smell of aged leather and pipe tobacco brought back childhood memories as I read his true vision for the property. Clearwater should be proof that conservation and community can coexist, he'd written. Money and power corrupt, but shared stewardship builds something lasting. Uncle Ezra hadn't just left me a lake. He'd left me a responsibility to show that neighborhoods could be more than just collections of expensive houses. They could be genuine communities built on cooperation instead of control. Sarah found me that evening, surrounded by environmental research and legal documents, planning the restoration of paradise. He knew this day would come, she said softly. Your uncle always said bullies eventually pick fights with the wrong people. Looking out at moonlight dancing on water that legally belonged to me, I felt the weight of destiny settling on my shoulders. Delilah thought she was crushing a troublesome neighbor. She had no idea she was about to face judgment from the rightful guardian of everything she'd taken for granted. Justice was coming, and it was going to be absolutely beautiful. Believing I was defeated and broken, Delilah decided to go for the kill shot. The emergency HOA meeting notice arrived on a Friday with all the subtlety of a nuclear bomb. Community Standards Enforcement Protocol Implementation, scheduled for Tuesday. Translation: Delilah was crowning herself Queen of Willowbrook permanently. The agenda read like a dictator's wet dream. Monthly waterfront maintenance fees of $500 for all boat owners. Mandatory use of approved service providers for marine work. Coincidentally, only Westbrook Marine qualified. Installation of community compliance monitoring systems that were definitely surveillance cameras pointed at everyone's driveways. She's not even pretending this is about rules anymore, Sarah said, reading the notice over coffee that tasted bitter as our situation. This is complete neighborhood conquest. But Delilah's desperation was showing in uglier ways. The whisper campaign had escalated to character assassination. Suddenly, I wasn't just running an illegal business. I was suffering from obvious mental health issues that made me dangerous to community safety. Mrs. Patterson crossed the street when she saw me, clutching her purse like I might rob her. The UPS driver mentioned hearing I'd been making threatening calls to neighbors. Even my dentist's receptionist asked if I was handling stress okay, because someone had expressed concerns about my stability. Psychological warfare designed to make me a pariah in my own neighborhood. Then came the bribery attempts, and I knew Delilah was truly panicking. Jim appeared at my workshop Tuesday morning looking like death warmed over. The smell of sawdust couldn't mask his obvious fear. She came to my house last night, he whispered, glancing around like we were planning a bank heist. Delilah offered me free boat storage for a year if I stopped supporting you. Premium dock space worth $3,000. Dr. Patel got similar treatment, fast-track approval for his deck project plus waived fees. Beatrice was promised violation forgiveness and exemption from new community standards. When they all refused, retaliation struck like lightning. Jim's work truck suddenly violated commercial vehicle restrictions he'd followed for 20 years. Dr. Patel's garden gnomes became culturally inappropriate decorations. Beatrice's bird feeders were cited for creating unsanitary wildlife congregation. The corruption was so blatant it would have been comedy if it wasn't destroying lives. But Delilah saved her nuclear option for me. Wednesday morning, I discovered my workshop violated in the worst possible way. 15,000 in tools destroyed, engine parts scattered like shrapnel, decades of organization obliterated in one night of pure hatred. The smell of spilled motor oil mixed with the metallic taste of rage coating my mouth. Spray painted across my workshop wall in blood-red letters, "Leave now or else." But here's where Delilah made her fatal mistake. My security cameras had been mysteriously malfunctioning for weeks, but I'd learned from those failures. Hidden backup cameras I'd installed myself captured everything, including something that made my heart race when I saw the footage. The Westbrook Marine truck arriving at 2:47 a.m. wasn't driven by some hired vandal. Richard Westbrook himself climbed out, followed by two men I didn't recognize. But more importantly, someone else sat in the passenger seat giving orders through the window. Delilah, personally supervising my destruction. When Officer Bradley arrived to investigate, his attitude had completely shifted since our first encounter. The evidence was overwhelming. Tire tracks, fingerprints, even blood on broken glass where someone cut themselves climbing through my window. "Mr. Kellerman, this crossed into felony territory," he said, photographing everything with professional thoroughness. "Breaking and entering, property destruction, criminal threatening. We're talking serious prison time." But the real bombshell came when I showed him the security footage. "Holy shit," Officer Bradley muttered, watching Delilah orchestrate my workshop destruction from the passenger seat. She was actually there, personally directing the crime. That changed everything. This wasn't just vandalism by proxy, this was hands-on criminal conspiracy by the HOA president herself. "Mr. Kellerman, I need you to understand something," Officer Bradley continued. "This video evidence shows premeditated criminal activity by a community leader. This isn't neighbor disputes anymore. This is organized harassment that could trigger federal civil rights investigations." The mini twist was beautiful in its simplicity. Delilah's need for control had driven her to personally oversee my destruction. Instead of maintaining plausible deniability, she'd put herself at the crime scene, on camera, directing felonies. That evening, Rodriguez called with news that made my pulse quicken. "Marcus, I've been monitoring court filings as a precaution. Delilah just made a massive legal blunder. She filed a restraining order petition against you claiming you're dangerous and unstable." "How is that bad for us?" "Because restraining order hearings require sworn testimony, under oath, about her allegations, her evidence, and her actions. She just volunteered to testify about everything she's done, under penalty of perjury." The irony was perfect. Delilah's desperation to silence me permanently had just guaranteed she'd have to answer questions about her criminal behavior in open court. Tomorrow night's HOA meeting was going to be interesting. But the real fireworks would come when Delilah discovered that her attempt to legally silence me had just handed us the perfect platform to expose everything. Delilah's restraining order hearing was scheduled for Friday morning, but she wasn't waiting for legal proceedings to finish me off. Thursday night, she pulled her most desperate move yet, filing false police reports claiming I'd made terroristic threats against multiple neighbors. Not just her this time, but Mrs. Patterson, the mailman, even the teenage kid who delivered newspapers. According to these reports, I had allegedly threatened to blow up the whole neighborhood if they didn't stop messing with me. The paperwork painted me as an unhinged veteran with anger management issues and possible explosive materials. "This is insane," Sarah said when Officer Bradley showed up at our door Thursday evening, backup units sitting in our driveway with lights flashing for the whole community to see. "Marcus hasn't threatened anyone, but the damage was done. Every neighbor was watching from their windows as police searched my property for dangerous materials. The humiliation burned like acid in my throat." Officer Bradley looked genuinely apologetic as he completed the mandatory investigation. "Mr. Kellerman, I have to follow up on these reports, but between us, the stories don't match. Mrs. Patterson claims you threatened her Tuesday, but security footage shows you were at the courthouse with your lawyer all day." The lies were unraveling in real time, but that wasn't stopping Delilah from doubling down. Friday morning brought an even more shocking development. I arrived at the courthouse for the restraining order hearing to find Channel 8's news van parked outside. Dana Morrison, the investigative reporter who'd covered our initial story, was interviewing Delilah on the courthouse steps. "Mrs. Westbrook is courageously standing up to harassment that's terrorized our peaceful community for months," the reporter was saying. "Today's hearing will determine if Mr. Kellerman poses a continuing threat to neighborhood safety." Delilah had called the media herself, spinning this as a brave homeowner protecting innocent neighbors from a dangerous outsider. The narrative was masterful and completely fabricated. But Rodriguez was ready with our own media strategy. "Let her dig the hole deeper," she whispered as we walked past the cameras. "Every lie she tells on record becomes evidence of defamation and filing false reports." The restraining order hearing was a disaster for Delilah from the opening statement. Judge Martinez, a no-nonsense woman with 30 years on the bench, reviewed the evidence with the thoroughness of a forensic accountant. Security footage disproving Delilah's timeline, witness statements contradicting her claims. Most damaging, the workshop break-in video showing her personally directing criminal activity. "Mrs. Westbrook," Judge Martinez said, her voice carrying the weight of impending judgment, "these allegations appear to be contradicted by significant physical evidence. Are you prepared to testify under oath about the events you've described?" That's when Delilah made the biggest mistake of her legal life. Instead of backing down, she doubled down on her lies with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Under oath, she swore I'd threatened her personally, described weapons in my workshop that didn't exist, and claimed I'd been stalking her family for weeks. Every word was perjury. Every statement was provably false, and it was all being recorded for future criminal prosecution. Rodriguez's cross-examination was surgical in its precision. Mrs. Westbrook, you testified that Mr. Kellerman threatened you at your home on Tuesday evening. Are you certain about that date and time? Absolutely certain. Your Honor, I'd like to present courthouse security footage showing Mr. Kellerman was meeting with me in my office from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Tuesday evening. He couldn't have been at Mrs. Westbrook's residence because he was 3 miles away discussing legal strategy. The blood drained from Delilah's face as she realized she'd just committed felony perjury on live record. But the real bombshell came when Rodriguez presented evidence we'd been saving for maximum impact. Your Honor, I'd also like to present video evidence of Mrs. Westbrook personally participating in criminal destruction of Mr. Kellerman's property while simultaneously claiming to fear for her safety from him. The workshop break-in footage played on the courtroom monitor, showing Delilah sitting in the passenger seat, clearly directing the vandalism operation. The timestamp proved she'd been lying about her whereabouts during the crime. Judge Martinez's expression could have frozen lava. Mrs. Westbrook, this video appears to show you at the scene of criminal activity you've attributed to fear of the petitioner. Can you explain this discrepancy? Delilah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She'd been caught red-handed in multiple felonies while testifying under oath about being a victim. The restraining order was not only denied, Judge Martinez referred the matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution of perjury, filing false reports, and conspiracy charges. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt like David who'd just watched Goliath collapse under the weight of his own lies. Channel 8's cameras captured Delilah's humiliation as she fled to her car, her lawyer refusing to comment. But Rodriguez grabbed my arm before I could celebrate. Marcus, tonight's HOA meeting is going to be chaos. She's cornered now, legally and socially. Cornered people do desperate things. She was right. Delilah had lost everything, her credibility, her legal standing, potentially her freedom. The emergency HOA meeting was still scheduled for tonight, and a desperate dictator with nothing left to lose was the most dangerous kind of enemy. Tonight, everything would end, one way or another. The Willowbrook Community Clubhouse had never seen anything like Tuesday night's emergency meeting. All 15 households showed up, plus uninvited guests that made Delilah's face go ghost white when she saw them. Channel 8's Dana Morrison sat in the back with her camera crew. Officer Bradley positioned himself near the exit, notepad ready. Most shocking of all, 2 federal agents in crisp suits flanked the main entrance. The FBI had finally decided our little neighborhood drama warranted attention. The smell of fear mixed with stale coffee and nervous sweat as residents filed in. Everyone knew tonight would change everything. Delilah sat at the head table looking like Napoleon before Waterloo, her usual designer confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. Her husband Richard hadn't even shown up. Smart man was probably consulting criminal defense lawyers. This emergency session will address the ongoing disruption caused by certain community members, Delilah began, her voice shaking despite obvious attempts to project authority. We must implement immediate protective measures. She launched into her prepared script about community safety and property values, but her heart wasn't in it. Hard to sound convincing when you've been caught committing felonies on video. That's when I stood up, Rodriguez beside me carrying a briefcase that might as well have been filled with nuclear warheads. Before we discuss community safety, I said, my voice cutting through the clubhouse like a blade, I think everyone should know who actually owns this lake. The silence was so complete you could hear Mrs. Naomi's hearing aid whistling. Rodriguez opened the briefcase with theatrical precision, spreading documents across the table like royal proclamations. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm attorney Janelle Rodriguez, and I'm here to present evidence that will fundamentally change how this community operates. She held up the 1956 land grant, its aged paper crackling in the sudden quiet. Marcus Kellerman didn't just inherit lakefront property from his uncle. He inherited complete ownership of Clearwater Lake through the Clearwater Lake Conservation Trust. Dr. Patel's coffee mug hit the floor with a crash that sounded like thunder. Beatrice gasped audibly. Even the FBI agents leaned forward with obvious interest. Every dock, every boat slip, every inch of waterfront access in this community exists at the discretion of the trustee, Mr. Kellerman. The community erupted like a shaken soda bottle, residents talking over each other, demanding explanations, some laughing in disbelief. Mrs. Patterson actually fainted and had to be helped to a chair. But Delilah wasn't finished fighting. "This is ridiculous!" she shrieked, standing so fast her chair toppled backward. "Some fabricated documents won't change 20 years of established community agreements." "Mrs. Westbrook," Rodriguez replied with surgical calm, "these aren't fabricated. They're recorded with the county, verified by state archives, and legally binding. More importantly, your harassment campaign against Mr. Kellerman violates the trust's foundational principles prohibiting discriminatory behavior." That's when Rodriguez dropped the nuclear bomb. "As of tomorrow morning, Westbrook Marine's unauthorized use of trust property will be terminated. $89,000 in unpaid commercial use fees are immediately due. Any further harassment of trust beneficiaries will result in complete revocation of community lake access." The mathematical beauty was perfect. Delilah had spent months trying to control my 3 feet of boat length while unknowingly trespassing on property I controlled completely. FBI Special Agent Catherine Morrison, no relation to Dana, stepped forward with the timing of a Broadway performer. "Mrs. Westbrook, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false police reports, and civil rights violations under federal housing discrimination statutes." The handcuffs clicking shut sounded like the closing of a book. Delilah's empire of petty tyranny ended with that metallic snap, witnessed by every neighbor she'd terrorized and broadcast live on local television. But the most beautiful moment came when Dr. Patel started clapping. Slowly at first, then joined by Beatrice, then Jim, then even Mrs. Patterson from her recovery chair. Within seconds, the entire clubhouse erupted in applause, not for Delilah's arrest, but for the end of fear. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said when the applause died down, "I want you to know that lake access will continue for all residents, but under new management focused on actual community harmony, not control." I announced the dissolution of the current HOA structure, replacement with a resident-elected lake management committee, and immediate implementation of environmental restoration projects funded by the trust. "Your uncle wanted this place to bring people together," Beatrice said through tears, "and tonight it finally has." Dana Morrison's exclusive interview afterward captured the perfect quote. "Sometimes justice takes time, but when it arrives, it's absolutely beautiful." Walking home under stars reflecting on water I legally owned, Sarah squeezed my hand tight. "So what happens now?" she asked. I looked out at the lake that had caused so much pain and was about to bring so much healing. "Now we build the community Uncle Ezra always dreamed of." The war was over. The real work was just beginning. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates looked like a completely different place. The Clearwater Community Festival was in full swing on a perfect Saturday afternoon, and the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Where Delilah's reign of terror once cast shadows over every gathering, now families laughed freely while kids splashed in the lake without fear of violation notices. The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with honeysuckle as I watched Dr. Patel teaching a group of neighborhood children how to identify native fish species. His Little Scientist program had become so popular we'd started a waiting list. "Hard to believe this is the same place," Sarah said, joining me on our dock with 2 cold beers. "Remember when people were afraid to use their own lake?" The legal aftermath had been swift and thorough. Delilah received 4 years in federal prison plus $750,000 in restitution to victims. Her husband's marine business dissolved completely, assets distributed among the people they'd defrauded. The FBI investigation expanded to 5 other communities, freeing hundreds of families from similar HOA corruption schemes. But the real victory was what we'd built from the ashes. The Clearwater Community Council met monthly in my workshop. No more stuffy clubhouse meetings or dictatorial board structures. Rotating leadership ensured nobody could accumulate Delilah-style power ever again. Decisions were made by consensus, disputes resolved through mediation, and every voice carried equal weight regardless of property value. The environmental restoration had exceeded our wildest dreams. The Conservation Trust's accumulated funds, combined with federal and state matching grants, generated over $200,000 for habitat improvement. Native fish populations had exploded, migrating birds returned in numbers not seen for decades, and the water quality was the highest in county records. Property values increased 18%, Not through intimidation and forced compliance, but because people actually wanted to live in a community that functioned like a real neighborhood. "Marcus," Beatrice called from the picnic area, silver hair gleaming in afternoon sunlight. "Come settle an argument about Uncle Ezra's workshop tools." She'd organized a historical preservation project, creating a community center in Uncle Ezra's old workshop space. His tools were displayed like museum pieces, along with photographs documenting his conservation work and handwritten journals about his vision for sustainable community living. The memorial plaque read simply, "Ezra Kellerman, who knew that sharing creates more than hoarding." Jim Morrison's construction crew had just finished the new accessible fishing pier, funded entirely through community donations and volunteer labor. Watching Mrs. Naomi's grandson catch his first base from the wheelchair-accessible platform brought tears to my eyes. "You know what the best part is?" Jim said, joining our little celebration. "Kids can just be kids again. No more tiptoeing around, no more parents afraid of violation notices for normal family life." The scholarship fund had become my personal favorite project. Using trust income, we'd established full college scholarships for local students studying environmental science, community planning, or conflict resolution. 3 kids were already enrolled in university programs, with more applying each year. My YouTube testimony before the state legislature had helped pass the Homeowner Bill of Rights, strengthening protections against abusive HOA practices statewide. The video went viral, 2.8 million views and counting, inspiring similar reform movements across the country. Rodriguez had opened a practice specializing in HOA abuse cases, using our victory as a template for helping other communities. The Willowbrook model was being studied by municipal governments and community planners nationwide, but the moment that meant everything happened during our anniversary celebration. Sarah and I were slow dancing to live music from the community band when a little girl tugged on my shirt. Emma, age 7, granddaughter of Mrs. Patterson, who'd once crossed streets to avoid me. "Mr. Marcus," she said in that serious way kids have when they're about to say something important, "my grandma says you saved our neighborhood. What does that mean?" I knelt down to her level, choosing words carefully. "It means we learned that communities work best when people take care of each other instead of trying to control each other." She nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Like sharing toys instead of hoarding them?" "Exactly like that, sweetheart." As Emma skipped back to the playground we'd built where Delilah's surveillance cameras used to monitor everyone's activities, I felt Uncle Ezra's presence in the evening breeze across the water. He'd left me more than property or money. He'd left me the responsibility to prove that neighbors could choose cooperation over conflict, stewardship over selfishness. Looking around at families enjoying their community without fear, I knew we'd honored that trust completely. "So," Sarah whispered as we danced under stars reflecting on our lake, "ready for your next adventure?" I pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of clean water and shared happiness. "This is perfect, exactly as it is." But speaking of adventures, drop a comment with your own HOA nightmare story. You might just see it featured in our next video. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell because property rights battles are happening everywhere and knowledge really is power. Share this video with anyone dealing with power-hungry neighbors. Sometimes all it takes is one person standing up to change everything.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.